Hey gang, Chase here, and today we'll be comparing the video capabilities of Sony's a7R Mark II and a7S Mark II. These newer versions come with enhanced features over their predecessors, so low light performance, resolution, built-in profiles, internal stabilization, autofocus, rolling shutter, and more were put to the test to see how each camera would handle the given situation. If you're interested in the photography features of these cameras, we highly recommend the first part of this series, and we will also have a third part that just gives you a quick rundown of each camera's top video and photo features. Alright, so before we get started, we wanted to let you know that all of our tests were recorded internally onto the SDXC cards using the camera's XAVC-S codec. Using an external recorder could absolutely have yielded us more information to work with, but we wanted to stick with what we considered the most commonly used recording method. So, let's begin with the camera's strong suit, low light performance. The R2's 42 megapixel full frame sensor features a new backside illumination which makes it better in low light than its predecessor, but it really started to fall apart for us around 6400 ISO and above. So we activated the R2's APS-C mode, which uses an 18 megapixel crop of the full frame sensor, allowing it to shoot cleaner at much higher ISOs. You do end up getting a 1.4 time crop factor after switching the camera over, which closely matches the Super 35 sensor size found on professional video cameras like Sony's FS7. Although the S2's mirrorless 12.2 megapixel sensor is capable of shooting through ISO 409,600, the R2 caps us at ISO 25,600 when in video mode, which is probably high enough for most practical video means anyways, so we're going to compare each camera side by side from ISO 800 up to ISO 25,600. We start to see some details in the dark areas at ISO 1600. Now we shot this test with the very commonly used Sony 24 to 70mm E-mount lens, which only opens to a 4.0, so having the ability to pull a clean signal at higher ISOs is a huge plus. As you can see, both cameras shot very well in an incredibly dark environment and created usable footage at unimaginable ISOs. But because the S2 has fewer pixels packed into the same area, its pixels are bigger and can cleanly collect more light, resulting in a cleaner looking image. Next, we tested each camera's internal 4K recording capability. Even if your final result is 1080p, like this camera comparison you're watching now, there are numerous benefits to shooting in 4K. So, when we downscaled each camera's full-frame 4K image to 1080p, we found that both appear to resolve quite nicely with a crisp dynamic image, but when we upscaled that image to its native 100%, we could clearly see that the S2 kept sharper edges. But once again, we found that switching the R2 into APS-C mode resulted in a better looking image, with resolution almost as clean as the S2's. The reason for this is because at full frame, the R2's extreme pixel count has to be reduced for video recording, which is accomplished through line skipping and pixel binning. But the APS-C mode only uses that 18 megapixel crop of the sensor and downscales that to 4K without any line skipping or pixel binning, resulting in a cleaner image. Both cameras can shoot with a standard Rec. 709 gamma curve and color space to minimize the need for post-color correction. But both cameras can also shoot with an S-log gamma curve and color space. Shooting in a log profile gives you a flatter, lower contrast image that preserves more data in the highlights and shadows, thus resulting in an expanded dynamic range, giving you more color correction options in post. Both of these cameras have S-log 2 right out of the box, but the a7S Mark II also has S-log 3, which is a more refined and optimized log profile. This probably won't be the big determining factor if you're choosing between these two cameras, but we wanted to show you that in the end, the a7S Mark II's S-log 3 is an advantage. The a7S Mark II also has the Gamma Display Assist feature that allows you to preview a graded look of your S-log image to precisely dial in your lens and camera settings for maximized detail and range while recording the untouched S-log signal. The a7R Mark II does not have this feature. Next, we put each camera's shot stabilization options to the test in a handheld configuration to see how they compared. If using an E-mount lens or an adapter with a lens that can communicate focal length information to the camera, you can engage the steady shot option in either camera's menu. This is an internal 5-axis image stabilization system that compensates for shake along all 5 axes of movement. If using a lens that cannot carry focal length information, you can dial it manually into either camera's steady shot menu to achieve 3-axis stabilization. As you can see, both cameras have very similar stabilization capabilities, but we were so impressed with both that we just wanted to show you. So, before I let you go, I'd like to quickly mention just a few more differences to consider about these cameras. Each offer improved autofocusing performance thanks to 399 autofocus points on the R2 and 169 autofocus points on the S2, combined with advanced facial tracking in both. The widely popular Metabones adapters work on both the R2 and the S2, but slow the autofocus speed on each. Now, because the R2's autofocus system is so advanced, this is barely noticeable on most lenses, but we found that the S2's autofocus system did slow significantly. The S2 has a more usable high frame rate function, offering 120 frames per second at 1080p, while the R2 only offers 120 frames per second at 720p. Note that at the 120 frame per second mode on the S2, you will get a 2.2 time crop factor of the sensor. The S2 only shoots 1080p in APS-C mode. There simply aren't enough pixels when cropped to produce a usable 4K image. Not a problem with the R2. When recording 4K on the R2, you don't get quite as much rolling shutter issues in full frame mode as you get when in APS-C mode. And when shooting in the high frame mode on the S2 in HD, it is hardly noticeable at all. So consider adjusting for your shots if you know motion is going to be a key factor. Now, while the S2 did not overheat for us during the duration that we used it, we did find that when shooting 4K at 100 megabits per second, the R2 did have a tendency to overheat, even when we were shooting in near freezing temperatures. So if you're hoping to record longer takes in 4K, the R2 may not be the best choice. However, after our testing, Sony did come out with a free firmware update for the R2 that combats this issue. And there you have it. Thank you so much for taking the time today to watch our comparison of the Sony a7R Mark II and a7S Mark II.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.